Okay, so today I'm in the kitchen because today I want to talk about nutrition for our Three Peaks event coming up very soon. I'm going to assume you've done all the training you need to do to get you through, and now I want to start to concentrate on just the simple things that make a big difference. And look, one of the biggest ones is hydration and nutrition. So look, when it comes to nutrition, I guess there's four main areas to focus on. The first would be your carbohydrate loading, sort of leading up to the event, which might start about 48 hours out. The next important one is that immediate pre-event meal, so your breakfast before you get to the start line. Then of course there's the big one that you've got to put a lot of thought into, which is what you're going to eat during the ride. And then lastly, but potentially the least important one, is going to be your post-event nutrition strategy. So look, let's start at the start. I think your carbohydrate loading, which most people have heard of, look, it is a thing, and I'll put up a quick chart of how much carbohydrate your muscles can store at when you're an untrained athlete versus a trained athlete versus a trained athlete who's done a carbohydrate load. So you can see in that chart, when you're carbohydrate loaded, you can store a lot more carbohydrate, and it can be up to 30% more. And that is going to equate to having more fuel in the engine to get you around that 235 kilometers. So there's a purpose to it, and here's my quick tips for it. Look, what I'll do is put up a document that I use for HP Tech athletes. I'll do you a favor and I'll stick it in the description. I'll put a link to it. So I would think about starting your carbohydrate load a few days out from the event. So our event is on the Sunday. What I'd normally do is have an athlete do a longer ride a few days out. So let's say it's going to be your Thursday is going to be a longer ride. So if you can do 3 hours, maybe 4 if you think you're capable of that and recovering from it. The purpose of that is to deplete your muscle glycogen in your legs a little bit, because when it's low, your body absorbs the glucose or the carbohydrate more like a sponge. So it'll suck it up a bit more and you'll get that what we call a supercompensation or your carbohydrate load effect. So I would start it potentially on a Thursday. I'd go for a ride in the morning Thursday. I would get home from that ride and eat straight away and eat a fair bit. So I would say for that day, you want to try and get in somewhere between 8 to 10 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram of body mass. And look, I've got it outlined in a document that I've got in the description for the carbohydrate loading as a guide as to what that actually looks like for about a 70 kilo athlete. You'll have to adjust it for yourself, but it can be a bit more than what you're normally used to eating. Look, the purpose of doing this a bit earlier is so that on let's say the Saturday night, you're not going to go and eat 2 pizzas and 2 sticks of garlic bread on Saturday night and feel yuck on Sunday and carry it all around in your stomach. What we're trying to do is do it a little bit earlier and just keep you topped up so then you can have a smaller meal Saturday night, just your normal regular meal, something light, so you feel nice the next day. So you could do this carbohydrate load potentially Thursday, maybe even, I'd say probably Friday is probably perfectly fine as well. But the whole point of it is to have 2 days in a row that are at least sort of 2 days out where you start to eat more carbohydrate than you normally would. And what you're going to do is top the body up. When you do your little Rico rolls around leading up to the day, the day before and stuff, you're not going to deplete it much. You've just got to eat again after those rides to top it back up again. And you should be able to keep it up pretty high. Look, it's simple to eat things like rice, pasta, all that sort of stuff that's got carbs in it, potatoes. I've got some cooked here. I eat plenty of potatoes. I just love the little instant packets of rice. I carry those around with me everywhere. The other great way to get it is also sports drinks. So in that way, you're also going to get your carbohydrate in. You're going to hydrate yourself and you're going to get those electrolytes in as well. And I think for the 2 days leading up to the event, it's smart to have a little bit more electrolyte, so salt, so sodium, potassium, magnesium, that sort of stuff, in some drinks leading up to the day. And I've got them here somewhere. I use the little tabs, the little effervescent tabs you put in your drink bottle. You've also got the sports drinks. Just make that up. Look, it's pretty simple stuff. It's just pretty much sugar and a little bit of flavor from the supermarket. It works great. So that's about it. So look, my biggest thing to take away from that is, one, start it early, potentially 48 hours out, so potentially on the Friday. I said Thursday before, now I think about it, I'm thinking more like Friday. And then try to avoid having this massive meal on Saturday night, because you start pretty early in the morning and you don't want to be carrying that bolus around in your stomach for the whole loop while you're riding. Okay, so that's our carbohydrate, pretty simple loading strategy. The next one is the morning of. Now this one, look, I think we roll out at 7 a.m. So you have to get up pretty darn early to have a decent breakfast. And usually the guidelines have something about 2 hours beforehand. I'm not the biggest advocate of that. I think if you're running or something like that, then yes, you want to have something a fair amount of time beforehand, because you can have GI issues when you're running. But I think on the bike, we're pretty safe to sleep in as long as you can and get a pretty simple breakfast in. Look, I'd probably say what I'd have is something that I've got on hand that I can have in the accommodation I'm going to be in. That might be, I get some little pikelets from the supermarket. I might put some Nutella on them. I have that. Love that one for pre-event. I might just have some white rice for breakfast with a bit of honey on it, or something like that is great. I'll have my coffee. I find my coffee does what it normally does in the mornings, and I go to the loo as well and clean myself out. And I'll also try and drink potentially up to about 500 mils of sports drink before the ride as well, just to top up your hydration status before you go. But the last thing you want is to drink a lot in the morning and then be on the start line and need a pee, and then be the last person to roll down Falls Creek because you were looking for a toilet when they said ready, set, go. So look, your morning of the event, keep it pretty simple, stick to what you know. It might be your Weet-Bix and milk, whatever, but just try and have something in. It should be around 2 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram of body mass is probably a good quantity to try and aim for. Okay, now for the big one that makes all the difference. Now hopefully you've been practicing this in all of your training rides. Now I'm going to start with bottles. I don't want to see anyone carrying little bottles like this on their bike. They're just not big enough. I use these in training when I'm doing 4 hours on the bike. I know I can top them up somewhere. I'll use those. You got ones a little bit bigger. I think they're about 600 mil. Then you go to about 700 mil bottles. I know last year I'm pretty sure I used these 2 bottles last year. They're 750. Well, it says 650 on the top. So if you top it up, it's probably about 700 right to the top. Then you can get your hands on some big fellas if you're really worried about hydration. These things are 950 mils, it says. They're probably close to a litre if you top it right up. Don't worry about carrying excess weight on the bike. You're better off having a bidon that you can fill right up to get you round. And once you drink 200 mils out of the top of it, you haven't got that extra weight anymore. It's doing something useful and it's actually inside you. Now, what would I put in my bidons? This is a good one. I usually run my sports drink. This is just Staminade from the supermarket. I think I put in 2 scoops per 500 mil or so. I wouldn't make it too strong. You don't want a really, really strong sports drink. It doesn't get absorbed from the stomach or emptied from the stomach into the intestine very quickly. If you have it too strong, it can cause troubles. What I do sometimes do, and I think I did this for Three Peaks last year, you can have a different type of carbohydrate. This is a maltodextrin based one. It's a non-sweet tasting carbohydrate. This is a brand called Hammer and their product's called Perpetuum. It's kind of like flour. It's sort of that consistency. I can make this up really, really strong in a bottle, and essentially you turn it into you can nearly make it into a slush. It's sort of more of a triathlon brand than a cycling brand. But what I do is make that up pretty strong in a bidon. and I can just sip on it. And then alternatively, in one bin I've got that, the other one I've just got water, and I can dilute that sort of swig I've had down. It's nearly half the concentration of a gel. I can wash that down with some water. So that gets me around to the first feed stop. The next feed stop, you sort of got to deal with what you've got at the aid stations. I'm not 100% sure of what the hydration brand for Peaks Challenge is. I don't actually know that, sorry. It might be on the website somewhere, but check it if you can get your hands on it beforehand. That's probably smart. Okay, so big bottles, that's what you want. That's probably the main takeaway. And fill them up at the feed stops and you'll be good. Now, I may carry in my pocket, maybe in a little Ziploc bag, some electrolyte tablets. These are the SIS electrolyte tabs. I'd stick them in my back pocket when I get to an aid station. I might grab some water and stick a couple of these in it just to get my extra electrolytes if it's a hot day. You can also carry some just plain old salt tablets. You can go to the chemist and you can get a little thing of, essentially they're just sodium chloride, I assume, just salt. If you are a heavy sweater and you tend to cake up in salt by the end of the day, it's probably smart to have some in case you start having issues. Okay, so on to what to eat during the ride, and this is probably the important part to get right. Generally, hopefully in training, you've been eating as you would on the day, so you know what stuff you like. You know, maybe you've had a few bad experiences where you're like, I didn't eat enough, I didn't start eating early enough. That's the biggest mistake. A lot of people will wait to maybe an hour and a half before they start eating. That's bad. You want to eat, essentially, if you can start eating maybe at the bottom of Falls Creek, which is potentially a 40-minute descent. If you've got a chance before then, just have something simple. So you want to start eating from the start because you want to keep the tank topped up. You don't want to let it empty and then try and top it up. It doesn't work like that. You got to keep topping it up. I guess I'll run through quickly why you've got to eat regularly. You store carbohydrate in your legs, which the muscles are burning while they're pedaling. You'll store carbohydrate in your liver, and that's what you're trying to top up when you have your breakfast in the morning. That liver carbohydrate or glycogen gets turned into glucose and goes into the blood. And that's the whole thing about diabetics and things. They have trouble regulating that blood glucose. But while you're riding, you want to keep that topped up. So what happens is, while you eat on the bike, what you're doing is absorbing that into the blood. If you're eating regularly, your liver doesn't have to release glucose to keep the blood topped up. And there's a big difference between bonking, so bonking when the legs run out, and bonking when you go hypoglycemic, when essentially the liver runs out of carbohydrate. That's when things get really messy and you're losing it. Like, you lose consciousness. Your body will say you're laying down because that's the safest place for you. So you want to avoid that at all costs. You want to eat regularly to offset the release of liver glycogen to keep that topped up. So on the bike, I'm just going to give an example of what I do. I would stuff my pockets full at the start of the day with some bars and some gels. Some people might go bananas. I'm probably going to go, with me to start off, I'm probably going to have at least 2 Winners bars. I'll have those in my back pocket. I'll probably have a couple of bags of the Winners chews, and I'm probably going to have, at least maybe 4 to 6 gels on me as well. Most of the time I'm eating gels because I just find they're the easiest way, just to go rip the top off, in, and you're done. Now, on gels, if I see anyone throw a gel on the side of the road, an empty one, a full one, I don't care, you're in trouble. Please stick them back in your pocket, stick them in the bin at the end. Even the little tabs on the top, if you can, just rip it off 3/4 of the way and squeeze it, and it'll stay attached. Yes, you get sticky by the end of the day because you've got gel leaking out in your pocket, but do us a favor and just please dispose of them responsibly. So you got essentially 3 pockets on your jersey. I would stick my gels in one, I would stick my bars in another, and I would stick the chews in another one. The chews can be substituted for just lollies. Sometimes I just stick a handful of snakes directly into my pocket. And they're just, you can eat them pretty regularly. That's something to snack on right from the get-go on the way down falls. Because that stuff just gets a bit blah after a while, and what I do in training is I have little bits of fruit cake, or I might have some rice cakes wrapped up in foil. This stuff's just plain old Coles light fruit cake. I chop it up. I think it's, I've said it before, it's the cheapest, best ride fuel in the world, I reckon. It's got everything you want. Okay, so how much, you're carrying all this stuff, you can top it up at all the stops. How much do you want to aim for? The general rule is somewhere between 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour, which can be a lot. So let's look at this. A gel is grams of carbohydrate. There's 30 grams in a gel. I'm pretty sure there's about the same in a bar, 37 grams. Those two together per hour, that's what you want. You want to aim for something very similar to that. The easiest way to remember it is potentially 1 gram of carbohydrate per kilogram of body mass. We generally in sports science, we don't recommend carbohydrate intake to be specific to body mass, because it's actually all got to do with the size of your absorption area of your intestine. And between someone who's 90 kilos and 60 kilos is actually, on the scale of what it is, like the size of a tennis court. It's not actually that much. So generally you want to get in somewhere between 60 and 90. If it's on the upper limit, you want to try and make sure there's some fructose in whatever you're having, because there's two different transporters for glucose and for fructose. And if it's just glucose, it kind of saturates those transporters from the gut into the intestine. If you add some fructose, it can go essentially through another door and get into the intestine, into the blood that way. So make sure whatever you've got's got some fructose in it. Most sports products these days do have that. What else do I eat on the ride? Look, our 8-hour group, I don't get a chance to have a sandwich at dinner plane. Eating a wrap is pretty hard. Last year it was in and out, filled bottles up, grabbed a few bits and pieces to top up my pockets again. Don't skimp on grabbing what you can and carrying it from the start. Have potentially more than what you need. Don't go crazy with having, you know, the whole fridge in your back pocket. Yes, it will slow you down up a hill, but don't risk it. And just, I always like to have just one extra gel just to get me around in case something happens around the back somewhere. So plan it out depending upon how long you think your day is going to be and where your first stop is going to be. Check that stop is what it's got. Make sure you can get more gels, make sure you can get more fluid, and go from there. And remember to eat regularly. One of the biggest tips is you can essentially set your Garmin or your head unit to beep at you, say every 20 minutes. You can set a timer. Then it'll just, every time you hear it go beep, that's your cue to have something to eat. That's the best way to do it. The biggest pitfall everyone falls into is they're in a bunch and it's hard to ride one-handed and reach into a pocket and not bump into the person next to you. That takes a bit of practice, but eat regularly is the biggest thing. And remember to always drink. And on the day, you do want to have just some water. If you are just stuffing in food and carbohydrate like crazy, it can sit there and not get absorbed in the stomach. You want to actually have something to dilute it so it gets absorbed into the bloodstream. What else? I think the other thing I want to run through is one sneaky little trick, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. You want potentially something with a bit of caffeine in it for the second half of the ride. I wouldn't be having a big dose of caffeine on the start line. I'd have my normal coffee, but I'd probably wait until a little bit of fatigue starts to kick in, which might be somewhere between around Omeo potentially. You can have it in gel. There's a gel here. That one's got about 80 grams of carbohydrate. 80 grams of caffeine. That's a decent dose, somewhere around, I'd say 1 to the high end, if you used to it, about 3 milligrams of caffeine per kilogram of body mass is a good guide. Look, a gel's fine, maybe 2 of them. Some of the SIS gels have got 150 milligrams. That's a big hit. One of the tricks with that, and I think if you want to try it, is some Panadol, something simple to have in your pocket. Those legs can hurt, your back can ache, everything can hurt after, 10, 13 hours on a bike. Some Panadol is good. You can get Panadol that have caffeine in them. It's actually in there for people with migraines because it vasodilates a little bit the blood vessels and it can help with headaches. So it's a good one to have. Panadol, I think it's a red box, not a green one. That's a good one to try if you're used to having it. So you can get a little bit of pain relief from all those aches and sore legs around the second half of it and get some caffeine as well. Just check how much is in there. I think there might be 100 milligrams in maybe 2 tablets, I think. Just check it. All right, my secret weapon is, before every event, I'm all about beetroot juice or just getting lots of beetroot in. These are baby beets from the supermarket. On the night before the event, or the day before the event, these little guys are concentrated beetroot juice. I don't know how many beetroots are actually in these little guys, but you can get them off Beat It Sports. There's a Beat It Oz. I think there's an Australian distributor. You can grab them off the website. You'd still have time to get them shipped to your house. I use these guys before most races, a time trial, big long day like this. It's a magic thing. The nitrates in it somehow make you more efficient, oxygen-wise. And I've just found on days where I've had it that things just feel a little bit easier. I can't say it's this or not. In science, yes, it shows it helps in a variety of situations. If you haven't tried it, maybe try and get some, give it a go before the day. It can upset your tummy a little bit because there's quite a bit of sort of acidity to it, maybe in the lemon juice they put in it because these things taste like dirt to disguise that. I'd have, in these silver ones, I'd have 4 the day before the event, so 2 at lunchtime, 2 at night, and I'd have 2 in the morning of the event, and then that's what you need. You don't have these during the ride, you have them prior to it and you load on the nitrate. Okay, for those of you who are prone to cramping, this little guy looks the same as the beetroot juice, but it's actually pickle juice. Pickle juice is shown to stop cramps, but the trick is it only stops cramps when you're having a cramp. It's kind of inconvenient. You can't load on this the day before and it's going to help you on the day. You can get this. I think you can get some form of tablets or even a gel format of it. You'll have to hunt around for it, but if you do have problems with cramping and you're worried it's going to happen, try and get your hands on some pickle juice. Have it in your pocket for the second half of the ride, maybe up the back of falls where lots of cramps tend to happen. If you're having a double leg cramp, you're on the side of the road, it won't go away. If you have some of this, there's a good chance it's actually going to help you. Okay, I think that's about all my tips for the day. The last one is the post-event one. Look, most people don't have an event or anything the next day, so post-event nutrition and stuff doesn't really matter too much. Usually you're looking forward to a pizza, looking forward to a beer. Last year I had Tour of Mansfield the next weekend, so I was concerned about seeing how I was going to pull up. Luckily I got there back early. One, I can tell you the showers at Falls Creek are really cold. I had a cold shower on the legs. I then walked down to the event village and I had a massage. Luckily I got to lay on there for about 45 minutes and a lovely lady rubbed my legs out and I just watched everyone roll in. It was kind of fun actually. I felt awesome the next day and I was actually amazed. I don't often get a massage post-event, but I can guarantee you recommend to you, if you are at the end of the day and you want to have a massage, there is usually a massage tent there. Try and duck in there and get a bit of a rub down and you should feel a bit better the next day. All right, that was a lot to absorb, no pun intended. I think I've covered everything I want to cover. If there's any questions, shoot me a comment in the attached to the video. I'll put up some of my links in the description above. I think they're above or below, wherever they are, to the sports nutrition guidelines, to the carbohydrate loading guidelines. Other than that, I think that's about it. Hopefully you've got good legs from all your training, and if you get this stuff right, you should get around in the time that you want to. All right, we're nearly there. I think I've got one more video left. I might run over some general stuff and potentially some bike related bits and pieces. But other than that, keep training. Remember to back it off now if you are feeling wrecked, but it's nearly taper time. So other than that, I'll see you in the next video. If not, I'll see you up there on the day.